The desert wind howled against the jagged canyon walls, carrying with it the faint smell of smoke and oil. A cluster of crude wooden barracks huddled beneath the looming cliffs, surrounded by a ring of watchtowers that looked more menacing than sturdy. Inside the barbed wire fence, dozens of weary captives slumped against the dry earth. Among them sat a woman, her hands bound, her posture slouched as though defeat had hollowed her spirit. To the guards who glanced her way, she was nothing more than another prisoner, silent and unremarkable. Yet, beneath the mask of exhaustion, her eyes told a different story. They were sharp, restless, and unyielding, always moving, always calculating. She watched every patrol, memorized every routine, and noted every carelessness that her captors dismissed. The others seemed broken, resigned to their fate. But she carried herself differently. Even in stillness, there was an undercurrent of purpose. The camp thrummed with the daily monotony of cruelty, guards barking orders, chains clinking, dust swirling in the relentless sun. Amid the harsh rhythms of captivity, one sight stood out, a hulking machine resting on a crude landing pad at the edge of the camp. The helicopter loomed like a predator among sheep, its metal skin glinting dully beneath layers of dust. Most of the prisoners avoided looking at it, knowing it symbolized power and unreachable freedom. She, however, could not look away. Every detail of it burned into her memory, the angle of the rotor blades, the chipped paint on its side, the crew who maintained it with careless routine. She watched how the pilots left the keys within reach, tossing them onto a desk as if no prisoner could possibly dream of touching them. Each observation was a puzzle piece, forming a larger picture she kept hidden behind a mask of silence. Her captors mocked her silence. No fire left, one of them sneered during mealtime, nudging her with the tip of his boot. She lowered her gaze, letting them believe she was broken. It was safer that way. But inside, her thoughts moved with the precision of a clock. She was not merely surviving, she was preparing. The central conflict of her existence grew clearer with every passing day. To her captors, she was powerless, a discarded opponent waiting to wither. To herself, she was still a soldier, stripped of her weapons but not her will. She knew freedom would not come through negotiation or mercy. It would have to be taken, wrested from the very hands that bound her. That night, as the camp settled into uneasy quiet, the faint hum of the helicopter's cooling engine drifted through the darkness. In the dim light of the guard post, she saw it, the ring of keys carelessly abandoned atop a desk. Her breath caught, but she did not move. Not yet. Instead, she lowered her eyes once more, pressing her back against the rough wall. The guards thought her beaten, her spirit extinguished. But deep within her gaze, unseen in the shadows, a spark had already begun to burn. The following morning broke with the same harsh sunlight that bleached the canyon walls and baked the dusty earth. Guards trudged through their routines, their boots crunching on gravel, their laughter coarse and careless. To them, the camp was a fortress, unshakable in its order. To the woman, it was a chessboard, and every misplaced step by her captors was another piece sliding into place. She labored alongside other prisoners, hauling crates and stacking supplies under the watch of armed men. To the casual eye, her movements seemed slow and weary, no different from the rest. Yet every lift, every glance, was purposeful. She noted where fuel barrels were stored, where the pilots gathered to rest, and which guards carried the keys to the gates. Her mind wove these fragments into a map of opportunity. One guard, younger than the rest, often lingered near her. He mistook her silence for fear, his smirk growing each time he approached. "Not so tough now," he muttered one afternoon, nudging the dust near her boots with the end of his rifle. She offered no reply, only lowering her gaze. What he failed to see was how carefully she measured his posture, the slackness of his grip, the way he grew distracted when boasting to others. Every flaw became a thread she tucked away for later. The helicopter remained her focal point. Each day it roared to life, blades chopping the air, lifting with brute strength above the canyon. She studied its ascent, the shift of its tail, the sequence of switches the pilot flipped before takeoff. She committed it all to memory, disguising her intense concentration beneath the mask of a prisoner too beaten to care. But fate rarely moves in silence. One evening, as the prisoners were herded back to their barracks, a commotion erupted near the landing pad. A mechanic had dropped a wrench into the dust, and in the scramble to retrieve it, a small service panel on the helicopter's side was left unsecured. For only a heartbeat, the interior was visible: wires, gauges, and the faint gleam of the ignition system. The woman's eyes fixed on it. That fleeting glimpse was more than a mistake, it was confirmation. The machine was vulnerable. That night, sleep refused to come. She lay awake, staring into the darkness, her thoughts consumed by the possibility that had taken root. The others groaned in restless slumber around her, their dreams shackled by despair. But her mind reached outward, beyond the barbed wire, beyond the canyon walls, toward the open sky. The conflict was no longer confined to chains and guards. It had expanded into something far larger, a test of whether she would seize the chance to reclaim control or remain a silent figure fading into captivity. The weight of the decision pressed on her chest, as heavy as the desert night. When the camp stirred awake at dawn, she rose with the rest, her face calm, her step steady. But behind her eyes, a plan had begun to take shape, sharp and unrelenting. The third dawn carried with it a restless wind, stirring dust across the camp as though the desert itself anticipated upheaval. To the guards, the day unfolded like any other: marching prisoners, inspecting supplies, checking weapons. But for the woman, every moment shimmered with urgency. She had spent days memorizing their routines, storing fragments of weakness, waiting for the sliver of time when chance and courage might align. That moment had arrived. Assigned once again to move crates near the landing pad, she suppressed the tremor of anticipation that threatened to betray her calm exterior. The young guard, the one too arrogant to notice his carelessness, hovered nearby. He laughed with another sentry, his rifle balanced lazily against his shoulder. She kept her movement steady, lifting and lowering cargo, but her mind raced. Each step carried her closer to the machine that dominated her thoughts, the helicopter, its frame glinting beneath the sun. Opportunity came not with a shout but with a yawn. The guard leaned back, stretching, momentarily turning his eyes away. In that breath of negligence, she slipped the slender metal shard she had hidden days before, a fragment scavenged from a broken crate hinge, into her palm. She had no illusions of its strength, but it would serve. In silence, she maneuvered closer to the unsecured service panel she had glimpsed earlier. The ground crew busied themselves refueling, their focus narrowed to the steady flow of liquid gold into the tanks. For an instant, no eyes fell upon her. With practiced swiftness, she pried the panel open and slipped inside a narrow ledge beneath the cockpit, crouching low in shadow. The roar of the rotors drowned out the sound of her heartbeat, masking the audacity of her move. Minutes stretched like hours. Her lungs ached, her muscles stiffened, yet she remained motionless, the very image of patience carved from steel. When the pilot finally approached, whistling under his breath, she exhaled once, long and steady. He climbed aboard, unaware that his cockpit now harbored more than instruments and levers. The engine rumbled to life, the ground trembling with its power. Guards waved their arms, signaling routine procedures, their confidence born from repetition. No one noticed that a prisoner was no longer among the ranks. No one saw the determination burning in her eyes from the shadows of the cabin. As the blades gathered speed, slicing the air into a deafening storm, her hand tightened around the shard. Her moment had come, not to fight recklessly, but to strike with precision. She would wait until the machine lifted, until escape became not just an idea but a reality written into motion. The helicopter shuddered, wheels leaving the earth. Below, the camp shrank, its walls no longer prisons but stepping stones to freedom. The woman steadied herself, poised to act. The storm she had prepared for was no longer distant, it roared around her, demanding a choice. The helicopter surged upward, its rotors thrashing the air into a relentless storm. The pilot, unaware of the danger crouched behind him, adjusted the levers with the casual ease of routine. The woman steadied herself, her eyes fixed on the back of his neck, her resolve sharper than the fragment of steel gripped in her hand. She had waited long enough. With one swift motion, she pressed the shard against him, cold against flesh, her voice steady but edged with command, "Step away from the controls." Shock rippled through the cockpit. The pilot froze, instincts warring with disbelief. A prisoner here, in his machine? Impossible. But the pressure at his throat made disbelief irrelevant. Trembling, he raised his hands, retreating from the controls, his every breath shallow. Without hesitation, she slid into the seat, her body molding to the instruments as though destiny itself had been waiting for this moment. She had studied the mechanics for days, her sharp mind piecing together patterns from glimpses and overheard commands. Now, with her hands gripping the controls, theory met practice. The machine bucked under her inexperience, dipping dangerously, but she corrected with raw intuition. Alarms wailed in the distance as the guards below finally noticed their error, shouting and waving frantically. Muzzles lifted skyward, but the helicopter was already veering toward the horizon. Bullets cracked through the air, some pinging against the steel frame. She gritted her teeth, forcing the machine higher, the desert unfolding below like an endless sea of gold and shadow. The pilot, now bound by his own fear, dared not resist. She glanced at him only once, her eyes blazing with unspoken promise. This was no act of desperation. It was reclamation. The camp shrank behind her, its walls collapsing into insignificance. The guards, once towering figures of power, dwindled into specks swallowed by dust. Freedom spread before her like a horizon painted in fire and wind. Yet escape alone was not enough. Her heart thundered with a fiercer purpose. She would not merely survive, she would return, stronger, a storm given flesh and steel. The helicopter roared across the sky, its shadow racing over canyons and ridges, carrying her farther from chains and closer to destiny. For the first time in years, she breathed without restraint, the air sharp and wild, filling her lungs with possibility. Every second at the controls etched a new truth into her spirit. She was not their captive. She was their reckoning. As the sun dipped low, painting the world in copper and blood, she tilted the craft toward the horizon. The enemy might believe they had lost one prisoner, but they had in fact awakened something far more dangerous. A storm was coming, and she was at its helm. The sky swallowed her flight, leaving only the echo of thunder where chains once clinked in silence.